BXB. It's in the game!
Hey guys, it's me Ben, back again with another one of my quick reviews. This time I'm looking at The Town of Light, now released on Xbox One and PS4 after being out for some time on PC. And this is one of those games which makes me raise up my hand and thank the gods that consoles now support indie developers and its smaller titles from them. This has been brought to us by Wired Productions, LKA and THQ. And this is a mixture of genres. This is a bit of a walking simulator, this is a bit of a point-and-click adventure game, and this is definitely a bit of a horror game. But to call it these things is perhaps a little bit of a disservice to this game, because this game deals with some very real, very upsetting personal issues. It's basically, this game is set in two time periods: in a modern day run-down mental asylum in Italy, and also in flashbacks, and flashbacks which will be cinematic and flashbacks which you can play within the asylum in the 1940s. And this is you play as, and you're looking into the history of the character Renee and what happened to her in the asylum in the 40s and the effect it's had on her up to the present day, and her journey back to try and come to terms with the absolute atrocities that were committed to her in this asylum. And this isn't some sort of twisted, silly piece of horror fiction. This is based on real life events and real life goings on within mental health hospitals in Italy in that period. The developers did a lot of research, photo research, document research into these events. And while the character might be made up and inspired by the kind of things that happened in these places, is very, very real. And because of that, this game is very, very disturbing. And the gameplay is basically you're walking around, you're picking up documents, you're doing some light puzzle stuff, which will then key off story moments, which you'll get in these two forms of cutscenes. You'll get 3D model cutscenes and these very disturbing, evocative 2D cutscenes. This game is a serious exploration of mental health issues and how people who've had them throughout history, up until relatively recently in modern times, were basically used, abused and mistreated due to these sometimes imaginary problems that they had, often because they were young girls and therefore somehow inferior. It's sort of educational, it's definitely upsetting, like I mentioned, it's very emotional, and it's a game experience which you just don't see very often. This isn't trying to be a shooter, this isn't trying to be a monster game, a piece of sci-fi, anything like that. It's just trying to tell a very real story. It's something you almost expect to read in a novel or a short story collection or something like that. Now, all of these narrative aspirations, these amazing characterizations, it doesn't quite work at times. One of the problems I had was I found that there's narration throughout this game. The lead character, Renee, is heavily voice acted. And I thought sometimes the voice acting worked and sometimes it didn't. Now, it might be because the developer is Italian, and therefore the English translation or English performance maybe wasn't something that came to them naturally. However, yeah, I just found it uneven. At times, the voice acting didn't carry the gravitas that I'd hoped, the emotional resonance you'd expect from somebody who'd been through these awful, awful things. And for a game that's very much trying to connect you to the realism of these horrible historical situations, that left me a little bit cold, and I hurt my connection to the narrative somewhat. The other issue I had with this game was that you are basically picking your way through at a very slow pace, because there's no running, everything's like a forced walking speed, through this asylum, picking up everything, opening every door, looking in every cabinet to trigger these events. There's a lot of backtracking, there's not a lot of signposting as to where you should be going, so there's a lot of just fumbling around literally in the dark. And while there's no horror per se in like monsters or ghosts or anything like that, the horror is this incredibly creepy situation coupled with the horrible, horrible things that happened to the main character throughout her life when she was in this asylum. So, like I said, the game is trying to attain a level of maturity and complexity within its emotional kind of setup and narrative that it does very well, but it's held back a little bit by the fact that it is a game, and it's not necessarily a brilliantly made game. It looks really nice. You can tell there's been a lot of photo referencing here, and considering the pace of the game and the smallest location, that damn right, it should look good. However, the gameplay itself is almost non-existent, and the constantly slow-paced walking around, just clicking and looking and clicking and looking, I kind of wish that had been handled better, and maybe the game had been a bit more narrative, sort of singular focused. It sort of pushed you down a critical path that maybe didn't make you have to spend so much time in this location just fumbling about. Focus my attentions on what needs to come next. Might have made the experience a little bit more enjoyable for me. But I still think the Town of Light is an exciting and different property to have on your Xbox and your PS4. It's definitely not what I would call a fun experience, but it is an important one. And I'm glad it exists in the video game format. So because of that, I give Town of Light 3 out of 5 stars.
BXB. It's in the game.